Hey guys, welcome to the Tech Career Booster. This is a series of video where we are building an app from scratch. It's gonna be an app for runners. It's made from runners to runners. And my name is Joss Baladin. I have a very special guest here today, Felipe Coelho. And in this video, Felipe is gonna be helping me to talk about the planning phase. We're gonna be talking about the phase 0, as I've mentioned in the previous video. So to start with, I'm gonna get Felipe to introduce himself. Felipe, tell us who you are and why you are here helping us.
Mhm. Hi, Joss. Thanks for the invite. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Felipe. I have been working as a business analyst for probably about 10 years now. I've been switching roles in between the projects that I have worked on, sometimes a little bit more functional, sometimes more analytical. But yeah, so why I decided to help you today? I'm very excited to be part of this running community that we are building, and therefore the app for us. So I thought that I could bring on some of my BA skills to support the project that we are going to build, and I think will be quite interesting um, would be quite an interesting experience for us to have as a volunteer. So it would be great to help.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks to be here. And guys, Felipe is gonna be helping us bringing his knowledge. As you all know, like this is a project made for the ones who are willing to become a dev. And we are gonna try to bring all the roles we have in software development to here and see if you guys need that to actually build your project from scratch. So for this project, because Felipe is a runner and also he's a BA. For those who doesn't know what BA is, means business analyst. So it's an important role in the tech career as well. It's an important role in the whole engine of creating software. And we may can create another video another day, Felipe, talking about the role of BA. I think it's going to be interesting, but that's not the subject for today. So today we want to talk about how we are going to start this first step of the app, which is the planning phase, the requirements gathering. If you guys watch the previous video, I've said that's the phase 0. So that's before everything else. You have to plan on what you're going to be doing. And you guys probably are asking yourselves, but if I'm only a junior dev, or if I'm only planning to create my own project, do I need a BA to create my own project? Do I need a BA to actually start the planning phase? If I'm just a dev, I don't have a BA, I'm probably building the project by myself. And I think that's the first question. Felipe, sorry if I throw you in the fire, but I don't want to throw you there. But I think that's the first question people want to know. Like, do they need a BA to actually create an MVP, a minimum viable product? That's what we are building here. Do you think a BA is needed to create this MVP at the beginning?
Um, that's a very interesting question, and you kind of put me on the spot there because I also want to protect my job. But having said that, so when you start your journey and you are starting to learn to code and how to develop your app, you're really focusing on the skill set that you need to build up your development career. So you kind of like don't really want to be doing these other tasks that would be someone else's role. But I think the planning phase is a task or it's a phase that you need in your journey that is very important. So you may not need a BA, but that does not take away the fact that you're going to need to do that planning phase. So for an MVP, you need to find the right balance between some planning, enough to get you set up for the to go and start running the app and your development journey and building your project. But you also don't want to be playing too much and doing too little. So you kind of like need to find the right balance. And for the tasks that you are doing for planning, at this stage in the project, you probably don't need a BA because it's just gonna hold you back. As long as you can do the minimum planning required for you to get that vision of where you are, where you're going, I think that's quite important. But yes, you're if you're starting as your solo as a solo developer, then you're not going to go into I don't know and try to knock on doors and say, hey, can you help on my project? So if you have someone that can help you out and has worked as a PA like I'm doing here, will be great. Otherwise, as long as you can cover some of the minimum tasks for the planning, for the phase one of the project or for the project zero, as you were saying, then you probably don't need a BA right now. But as you grow, that role will become more and more important, mostly from the analytical space, where we're going to start merging what you have done to the responses and the data that we are receiving from our users to make better decisions, basically.
That's interesting. Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on a spot, but yeah, thanks for that, and thanks for
That's
responding that
okay.
very frankly. So that's what we're gonna be doing today. So we are not gonna try to plan everything beforehand, as you mentioned. We're gonna try to identify what are the minimum things we have. Can you try to bring to our audience what we're gonna be doing today here, what we are gonna try to achieve in this video and in this phase of the app?
So I believe the purpose of today's video is for us to kind of like detail a little bit out what that planning looks like and the minimal steps that you need. So we're gonna be identifying the benefits that will be getting from the app, the problems that we are solving, um, potential a little bit of a detail in the functionalities and how we actually write or we capture those ideas into artifacts. So that's kind of like the line that I would like to go. So in very few words, we would be detailing a little bit more what the planning looks like, and we will. I think last video we spoke about your architecture. What are the tools that you're gonna use? What are the languages that you're gonna be developing? So that's the whole non-functional requirements. That's how your system will be um, will be running. And what we are doing today is what behaviors we expect to for the system, and we call those functional requirements. Or I think majority of people they will be more familiar with the word feature. So, what features would you like to have on the app? It's what we will be defining here, breaking down, and then how we break that vision of where we want to be in small chunks of work, and then start doing the job properly.
That sounds exciting. And what we are not going to be doing, just to be clear for the guys, like what we are not aiming to actually achieve.
So, as I said earlier, we need to find the right balance between planning and really doing the tasks that you need and do the coding. So we're not really doing a full plan. I don't really want to go that way. I don't really want to spend too much time on the full planning. I just want to give you enough for you to just have that overall visibility of what you're doing and then know where to go for the next steps if something when you finish up one of your tasks and you need to go to the next one, then you know exactly what structure you need to follow or where you should be focusing on. So that's where I want to go. So this is definitely not a full plan before starting anything. It's just us for identifying what's the bare minimum that we need to get to get to start the work. So it's kind
Mm,
of like it will definitely be more a simplistic approach to initiate the app development following um, some agile processes, perhaps, or frameworks.
Okay, yeah. So changing hats now, like putting my runner hat now. So basically, what you're saying, we're gonna have the minimum features we need in the app to actually have something ready for production. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. We're gonna go into a little bit of a detail in this, but yeah, essentially, what we are trying to do is for the first version of my app, you don't really want to build a very nice thing from the beginning. You kind of like want to build something that is good with some capabilities, not everything that you have thought about. And then from that version onwards, then you start feeling okay. This is probably something that will make a lot more sense if we add later on. This is something that we should start right now because that will be the first experience of the user with the app. So that's what we want to identify. What is everything that's going on in our mind? How we prioritize that everything, because like we humans, they are very creative in nature. So it's not a coincidence when you say, "Oh, I'm gonna build an app," and then you have 1,500 ideas that comes into your mind, and you kind of like sometimes you may feel stuck because you say, "Oh, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do that." You kind of like want to narrow down that whole thought. We are not ignoring anything. We are acknowledging and perhaps capturing those for a later point in time. But we want to break that down, and we want to be very pragmatic on what exactly we're going to start, how we're going to do that, and what we do with the rest of the ideas that we got in the back of our minds.
Interesting. So yeah, sorry, changing hats again and put now my agile coach hat because
Mm.
that's my role. I have to make a break here and just explain, guys. These steps Felipe just described, it's basically the agile process. It's based on iterations. So what we are doing here is basically the first iteration. And from that very basic first iteration, we are starting with the planning phase, but we don't want to plan all our app, everything we want from beginning to end. We just want to plan the minimum thing we need to deliver some value for the users. And that's an agile principle. An agile principle is always deliver some value to the user. And that's what we are trying to do here in this first iteration. We're going to be doing the first iteration of the app, which is planning what's the minimum features we need. And then later on, we're going to be coding. If you guys didn't see it, we have a live coding session. It's going to be happening for the next 4 Thursdays at 5:30 p.m. Sydney time. So stay tuned. You're going to see the live code sessions. But getting back to here, I'm going to start to go a bit deep now. Felipe is going to start to explain us a bit deep what's that. But before talking about the requirements and talking about the My Run Mates app, we also want to bring to you some benefits of doing that, of what we are going to be doing here and why you should be doing that too. So, talking about benefits, I want to ask Felipe the first question. Felipe, why do you think doing this planning and doing this phase is important for the guys who are watching us? If they are following our process and if they're going to be doing the same, why it's important first for us and then for them?
I believe that generally speaking, planning is just a fundamental thing that you need to include in kind of like everything you really want to do. So I think the benefit of doing this high level planning, what we were calling earlier, that's not very detailed and it's not a full plan of everything, but just the minimum for you to get started. It's really built up a skill, which is how you break down things into small bits of work and how you put those pieces together for you to achieve the goal that you're trying to achieve. So I can give many examples on the benefits of that in software development, in IT, or even outside of here. Even if you think about running, right? So you're talking about a running app. If you're just not gonna go and sign up for a marathon, and in a month or so you're just gonna go there and run 42 k's. You probably know that better than me. You gotta have some planning on how your training is gonna be looking like in the next few weeks before you can actually go and show yourself up into the race. So it is no different into what we are doing here for the app. You kind of like want to plan for what the next weeks they will be looking like. So by the time you're ready to do your first deployment into production, then those tasks they have already been accomplished because you were able to identify them and break down into small chunks of work that have a logical sequence. So I think it's actually very important for you to not to watch this video and try to understand what we are doing with our app and apply to yours. That's my belief, I would say.
Yeah, that's something they definitely can't neglect. Like if you are building an app, which I strongly recommend you do for your career, like if you are starting as a dev, you should be creating your own project or joining someone else's project, but you have to get some hands-on experience, and you can't neglect the planning phase. So basically, you have to invest time on it, and there are many reasons why you have to invest time on it. Felipe, do you want to elaborate a bit more on that?
Yeah, surely. I would say to begin with, when you are building your own app, I'm not sure what your career aspirations are, but let's suppose that you are learning to code, so you want to work in an industry rather than building your app and trying to commercialize. You are learning to become a developer, and you want to work in IT for another employee, right? Right. So planning will be a very important chapter for everything you do. It's where you get all the stakeholders aligned on what the work will look like. It's when you discuss how long that's going to take. It's when you will discuss and try to get really everyone on the same page on what the outcomes will look like. So I think you should definitely invest some time doing it and knowing what to do and what you should not do. It's very important. I will actually say delay doing it. So we are trying to acknowledge things that we think about it and they need to be done at some point in time. Later on you may decide they don't need to be done, but you should be able to identify on the spot if that's something that you should really be doing or that's something that you should be delaying. So you should be really having a look into this and get some sort of help for yourself on what areas I should be focusing on. What are the important tasks that I need to do? And I think this video will be great because that's what we are trying to do here. We are trying to provide you as many tools to guide you through this process for you to be able to identify what's important and what's not important. And I would actually to I was reading a book another day. It's called The Only Thing, and it really talks about this. So we should be focusing on one thing at a time, getting it done, and moving to the next. It's a very pragmatic approach. It's not very easy to follow, and I think I'm also always learning in that process. But I think it's really what you're trying to do. What's the most important thing that I should be doing right now? And get it done, move to the next without having all the noise that comes to with the other things that we have on our minds that could be great for the future of the app. But uh, you really want to be in that space where you have something and that something is giving you better ideas than having nothing with a bunch of ideas that may not make sense.
Yeah, that's 100% accurate. And more than that, guys, you may be thinking like, but the app I'm building, the first thing you have to think of is that like for you, or is that for someone else to use? In this case here, when we are talking about the My Run mates, we have many hats, as I mentioned before. Like Felipe and myself, we are both runners, so we know what a runner is expecting. So we know what the users are expecting in one hand. In the other hand, we are IT specialists, let's call that. So we know how to build that app. We know how to build whatever we need to build for the user to actually have what they need. So we have both sides. But as you are developing something, your personal project, it's probably something you are the actual user of that. Or if you are not, you have to have contact with whoever is the user of your app. Felipe, what do you think is actually the biggest benefit of doing this planning phase?
Well, I would say it's having a blueprint on what your next step should be. What are the what It's a little bit hard to really break down what's the biggest benefit. I think it's just a crucial thing that you need to do. But if I have to choose one thing, is having these structure. I will use the word structure. Is having this structure on where should I start, where the next step should be, and where I'm going. It's like summarizing enough, I guess.
Yeah, makes sense. And what happens if I don't do that? Like if someone I just want to start, I just want to put my hands on and start coding. I'm going to open my IDE and I'm going to start coding. Like, what happens if I don't do the planning?
That's a very good question. I would presume that nobody can really stop you from going straight into coding. But what we are trying to avoid is it's not really avoid, but we are trying to make the best use of your time, right? So you can take 15 years to develop an app. You can take 15 days. So it really depends on how much effort and what are the results that you're expecting. Obviously, if you're developing an app for 15 years, then I would hope that will be as good as like as it. I would presume it's the best app in the world because it took 15 years to build it. But maybe the way you actually go into that 15 years is by starting with a deployment in 15 days, and after 15 days, then you start having a little bit more understanding on your users, the data that they're consuming, what exactly they are doing in the app, and also you can introduce reviewing processes so you can collect more information and take better decisions later on features, on and even fixing bugs, right? So I would say that you probably feel very overwhelmed. We kind of like we are in the beginning of your coding journey, so you already have a lot to take on. You have a very big learning curve because you're learning languages so you can develop. You're learning about structures. You're learning about different tools that you can use for many things. As you have mentioned in the other video, I think you have given quite a few examples on how you actually can manage your deployments, things like that. Um, so it's very overwhelming, and what we are trying to do is it's really give you some direction. So what's going to happen if you don't do it? I think you're going to feel some lack of direction. You may finish up one feature, like you do the entire coding, and then you're like, okay, so what I do now? And you should really have this structure for you to go and say, okay, I have done this, now I'm going to do that. And later on, this plus that will become the results that I'm expecting for. So not doing it, it would be in summary a lack of direction, some disconnection between what you're doing in your daily tasks and the outcomes that you are perceiving for your product.
Mm. Yeah, my feeling is it's like jumping in a car and start the engine without even know where you're going. Like you jump in the car, you start the engine, and I'm gonna drive.
Mhm.
Drive to where? Where you're driving to? You can start driving without knowing where you're
Mm.
going, but you're gonna end up nowhere. So for me, it's something like that.
And it reminded me of a quote, right? I think there's a quote that says, "If you don't know where you're going, anywhere is fine."
Yeah, that's true.
So you want to start coding, sure. You may have to. That's the one of the greatest thing of planning, right? You can definitely start coding straight away, and I by any means I think you should do that at some extent for you to having some familiarity. Maybe you're still finding your ground, and you're trying to find which languages you like. Great, sure, but when you are developing a product, then I think that's where you should kick in, because as I said, you can drive anywhere, right? So it's, for example, if we are in Queensland, right, in Australia, if we want to drive to Sydney, it's 8 hours driving. But if you want to stop on the way and you want to, I do not know, there's quite a few cities, beautiful cities, and you want to stop on the way, that's fine. But then it's not going to take you 8 9 hours. It's going to take you 2 3 days. Don't know. Depends on what you want to do. So it's really another analogy is really putting what your end goal is into your Google Maps, and that's gonna take you there. So that's I think it's the best analogy that we can think about for sure.
Yeah, that's true. Some people may be thinking, okay, but I just want to become a dev, and if I join a company uh, as a dev, if I'm hired as a dev, I'm probably going to be getting that ready. So someone has planned that already, and they're just going to come to me and ask me to code that. Despite that is sort of true, depends on the size of the company you join. If you join a startup, for sure you're going to be being part of the planning. But if you join a bigger company, yeah, probably it's going to come to you sort of already done, and then you're just going to be coding. But so you may be thinking why it's an important skill to me. And I think Felipe has a good example of why this skill of being able to plan, or at least being able to understand and know how to plan, is important. Felipe, can you give us a good example why it's important for a dev?
I Yeah, in my opinion, all right, and there's no right or wrong, but in my opinion, it's really important for you to understand where you are heading to before you start getting your hands dirty on your deep work. And the reason of that is the only way you can actually build a skill where you can sit down and you can start preparing your task, and you're going to be looking at your screen for a few hours and you're going to be doing coding, and he wants to have some attachment or some sort of connection between what that is and what the future looks like. What sort of outcomes the task that you are doing right now is giving you to the overall scheme of the thing. So it's really being able to visualize what each individual task that you perform on a day-to-day basis um, represents for the whole scheme. So for a holistic view of the thing. So it's comprehending what the holistic view is composed of. And I think this is a phenomenal skill, not only for coding, but for everything that you really do. So the only way you can actually develop this skill is through planning, because planning is where you stop a little bit your deep work and you start thinking ahead. So you start thinking the outcomes and you kind of reverse engineering. So you are going in the future or in a future state that you would desire your app to be, and you will be looking to that and you say, okay, for me to get there, I need to do this, and that. And then you can break down into, I don't know, 100 tasks, each one of these. But it's really having that breakdown. So when someone comes to you in your first job and they have already planned on what the deliverable looks like, you would really be you would really should be knowing what what your daily tasks represents to that outcome. So if you go into a very large company, like we are building an app and it's just you and Lucas, right, the decoders. So between you two, you may say, okay, I'm going to do this feature, Lucas will be doing this feature. I do not know exactly how you're breaking down your tasks, but everyone is equally important into that process, because after you finish up your work, then you need to know what the next thing will be. And perhaps Lucas will be relying on you to finish that piece of work so he can start his next one. So there's always a correlation between what you're doing in your daily tasks and what the future will look like and what the outcomes, the expected outcomes will look like. And I really think that planning um, is the only activity that you can do to enhance your ability to visualize that connection and visualize how important what you're doing are for the whole scheme and for the outcomes that the company or for your app will be providing, the values that you mentioned that you'll be providing to the user. How important is what I'm doing right now? This is I think the skill that I would like to build. It reminds me really of a quote, all right? And you might be realized that I love quotes, right? So the story goes like this. I'm not going to remember exactly, but the story goes like this. There are two builders working in a construction site, and a man walks past. He's walking his dog, and the first day he walks past, there is a worker in the construction site, and he asks the worker, "What are you building up there?" So it's a construction site. "What are you building up there?" And then the first guy says, and he's like, "Oh, I'm just getting the pavement done," right? And he's like, "Oh, okay, that's interesting." The next day, the same guy walks in, and there is a second worker in that construction site. And he asks the same thing: "What are you doing there?" And the second guy responds, "I'm helping out building a cathedral so people can have a safe place to pray." The moral of the story is you should never lose sight of what your end goal is. And it's really interesting that they use the first guy say pavement, because we have the expression pave the way. What's paving the way? It's giving you direction. It's getting the road ready for other people to come and use it. So it's really having sight of what that goes will look, what the end goal will look like, and that will pave the way for your day-to-day tasks. So they have some logical connection between what you are doing right now and what they will be in the future. I think that's a beautiful code, and I think that is a phenomenal skill that you should be able to develop, and will be really nice for you in your whole career, really. Even if you decide that you don't want to do coding anymore.
That's a beautiful quote, really. And in these times of AI, I would say that could be the difference between, like, many people, they ask me, are the AI tools, they are replacing devs? And I would say that's the difference between the devs who are going to be replaced and the ones who are not going to be replaced. The ones who are only building the paving, they are going to be replaced by an AI tool because they are just
Mm,
doing a task. They don't have the full picture on what they are doing and how this task is going to contribute with the full picture. You have
mhm.
to have like that vision, how this small task you are doing at the moment, how it's going to contribute with the full picture. That's a very beautiful quote. Thanks for bringing that.
Oh, that's right. You mentioned about AI, right? Um, so don't. I guess there's just a lot of fear whether we are getting replaced with AI or not, right? Um, it's a tool as any other tool. So you use it as the best as you can, and you do what the AI cannot do, then you'll be fine.
True.
That's what I believe.
Yeah, I believe that too. Just a correction, I remember now about the team. You mentioned it's just Lucas and myself, but I actually got one of my students, a mentee.
Oh, nice.
I'm his mentor, and he's going to be helping us as well. His name is Alex, and
Oh,
he's also going
nice.
to be coding. It's going to be a good experience for him
Oh, nice.
as well as for us. But yeah, I think it's time to actually go to the how-to, and like we have been talking about planning phase, and we have to plan, and I think uh, whoever is watching us, they are already convinced like they have to plan. There is no way to escape from that. And then the next question, when it comes to their mind, probably is going to be, okay, but how I can do that? I
Hmm.
just want to become a dev. How I can actually plan? And I think we should start on what you should not be doing, or where the most people actually fail when they think of planning. Do you have some failing points you remember on top of your mind, Felipe? You want to bring to us?
There's quite a few, but I think I'm gonna answer this question in kind of like a very biased opinion way, because in my opinion, I think one of the biggest failures that I see in some of the projects is you not finding the right balance between planning and doing. So I think the MVP is one of the greatest concepts ever created for IT, for software development, because that allows you to get out of that planning phase and not being completely immersed for that planning experience, if you like, and allows you to find a balance between planning and start really coding and really putting the work down and getting things done. So to me, the biggest failure, it's really you either planning too much and doing too little, or you're doing too much and planning too little. And it's really hard to give you um an exact thing to identify whether you're doing too little or too much, because it really depends on the nature of your project. It's kind of like a feeling, so you want to have enough, so you have work lined up for the upcoming weeks, but you also don't want to be in the space where you have work for a whole year, but then you don't really have those achievements along the way. So that's how I would identify one of the failures within doing the planning process. And to adding to that, it's also a lack of identifying what the problems that you are trying to solve, and what are the pain points that you are targeting with the software that you were building. So if you think about it, what's the most important, who or not what, but who are the most important person for your app? It's the user.
Sure.
So you said many times in here we are IT specialists, but we are also wearing the hats of the user. So we are shifting between those two roles at the same time, and it to us is kind of like natural. But for the others, it's really important for sometimes to think about it. Am I thinking like a developer or am I thinking like a user? Because sometimes you think like a developer and the outcome that the user will have will not be connected to what the pain point is. So identifying the problem, and there's an artifact we call problem statement for that. We'll mention later on, I guess. And identifying what pain points you were trying to solve. It's also one of the fail points that you can do in planning, because otherwise you just do your whole planning, but you are solving a problem that, or you might not be even solving a problem in that sense.
Yeah, interesting. I just want to get back to the first one you mentioned, like that balance between how long to plan and actually start.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have a sort of tricky for that. I'm very fan of agile methodology, and
Mm-hmm.
not by chance I am agile coach. But
You're biased. Whatever you say is biased.
yeah, whatever I say is biased. But to be honest, I use that for everything. Everything I want to get done in life, basically, I use that sort of agile process, which I quite like, which is actually time boxing stuff. So to
Mm-hmm.
avoid that problem Felipe just mentioned, what I usually do, I just plan enough for the next few weeks. And obviously that how much those few weeks is going to be depends on what you are doing. Depends if it's a system, a software, or even, as I said, I use that for many different things. Even for my coaching sessions on everything, I still using like agile methodology. And how we do that, we usually plan, that's one of the phases, but we plan only enough for the next 2 weeks, let's say. So we only plan tasks and things we're going to do in the next 2 weeks, obviously without missing the end goal. You should be always looking forward to the end goal where you want to achieve by the end of the process, but you should not be planning for the whole process or for the entire thing. You should be only planning for the next few weeks or for the next few, let's say, months. Depends on what you're doing, really. But you should be time boxing that. Just time box how long you want to plan for, plan tasks enough for that time, and then start doing it. I think that's a good way to actually get to that balance. Um,
Yeah, I
so
agree.
cool. Felipe, do you think we can actually jump to how to do that, like where people can start?
Sure. So I think, as I mentioned, when you are starting your whole thing, everything you do, you are trying to solve a problem, right? And when I say solve a problem, it may not be a problem for how can I explain this? I'm probably gonna should use another code, or I should. I'm not gonna use a code, but I'm gonna mention someone who everyone will probably know about is Steve Jobs, right? So Steve Jobs used to think that sometimes you are not really solving a problem, you are building a solution, and later on you create a problem, or you create a problem and then you create the solution for that problem, and the person doesn't even know that they have that problem. So, and a good example is the iPhones. They have always like phones, they mobile phones, they have always been there. iPhone came in, it wasn't anything new, right? Mobile phones already existed, but then they still thrive. Why? Because they create problems that we didn't know we had. So they create problems that we didn't know we have, and they solve it. And now, boom, there you go. Apple is there, and I don't need to really further digest into that. So the first thing that we'll really be doing is identify what problem we are solving. And for the Roommates app, the problem we are solving is how we connect individuals, running individuals, to running communities. So it's really connecting individuals to a group of runners and enhancing their sense of belonging. So we always want to be part of something. It's human nature. And what we are trying to do here is something that we have experienced before. When you, for example, you are traveling for work, or you're traveling and you still want to be doing your exercise, and perhaps you want to stop by a coffee shop, and you want to know what are the best coffee shops in town, and you want to know, maybe you want to meet some people, then that's what the running community will help you. So um, it's really giving you that opportunity to go into a new place, or even where you are right now, and look around and see what's available. So you start your running journey, and it doesn't have to be, you don't have to go out of the house and run alone. Maybe you like it, but that's fine. But I think it's the social component of the running, it's really the best part of it. So I have been to a few running clubs before, and after the run, there is always like people stop to get a coffee, sometimes they have breakfast later on, and then you build up some connections. And it's great because every time you build a connection based on something that you guys already have in common, which is the running in this case, I think it helps you out on really making more friends. And friends is great, right? I love having friends. um, so that's really what we're trying to solve with this app. It's connecting those individuals to this running community, so they can find their own ground, and they can find these social run clubs around them.
So yeah, basically that was my initial idea. Yeah, I wanted to belong to that community of runners because I'm a runner myself. I like to run, and I wanted to belong to that community. And despite we have many running clubs around there, uh, I found I found quite hard to actually uh, grab information from them. You know, because it's
Hmm.
always spread out. You can Google it, yeah, but every club sometimes they have their own website, sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's just like a social media group, for example, a Facebook group or something, and then you have to ask to join, and some people have to approve you, and even in that group you can't find much information. So I found quite hard to actually finding those groups and joining them. It was not something quite easy. uh,
You have mentioned a very important thing. You said I can just Google it, right?
mm,
And sometimes people think that they should be solving problems that nobody has solved. And that's not true, right? You can try to go and find it. Sure, there's plenty of problems in the world that nobody has been able to solve. Sure, I'm also pretty confident that majority of them they already have some sort of solution for. And what you really want to be doing is identifying what the problem is. It's not it's kind of like not trying to find something that does not have a solution and start building it from the ground. It's identifying what the problem is and how you enhance that experience. So you just said that I can Google it. Yeah, we can Google. We can find all the events, all the running events. We can find all the running clubs that are around us. Or we could simply have them all together in one place, and by a few clicks, you you have the information that you need without having to browse on the internet for 3 hours, you know? So it's, I think that's very important to emphasize. It's not, you're not trying to find a solution for a problem that nobody has solved before. You are just trying to identify what the problem is. And later on, you're going to come up with the conversation on how am I going to solve it.
that's
Does
true.
that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does, and I think exactly what you said. Like people think, oh, they have to find something completely different, or the best solution for something which no one's actually was able to come up with that solution. And definitely that's not true. Uh, as a dev who is looking for a problem to solve, you should be look around. What are the things which are bothering you at the moment? What are you are trying to do, and it's not that easy. Can you make some of your daily tasks, some of your daily stuff you are doing? Can you make some of that easy? Doesn't matter
Mhm.
if it's a hobby or if it's something at your job or whatever you're doing. Is there anything you can enhance in there using technology? That's the question you should
Yeah.
be asking yourself. Can you use technology to enhance some of your daily experience?
That's totally right. And if you think about it, what are the greatest inventions of all time, right? You probably have one in your desk right now. This is one of the greatest inventions of all time, isn't it? So
Definitely.
didn't uh, uh, didn't we have the problem of communication before? I would presume some people from that past years, they would have thought writing letters was good enough, right? And what the phone does is it's really facilitating connection between two people that can be anywhere. So the problem has always been there, and it was solved at some extent, right? So it's the same thing with the GPS. You always had physical maps, and not always, but someone back in those days have managed to draw them up. And you would go. I remember when I was a kid, and GPS did not exist. It would it would get those
Yellow pages.
from the supermarket or the newsagent, and then you just go on your trip with your parents, and you would eventually find where you should be. And then the GPS is doing just facilitating the way for you to get there. So it's really what you said. Like the biggest inventions of all time, they are facilitating the way things work.
Yeah. So let's see. Let's move forward. And
Yeah,
thinking of the running clubs and the running app we are building. What are the pain points for the user? As a user, I can list many here, but I think like you are a runner too. So let's try to bring some pain points we had, and why we came up with this app. Do you want to
yeah,
start?
yeah. I think before we start that, I like to do something when I'm doing these brainstorm sessions or when I'm trying to capture these pain points, problem solving, things like that. I like to actually try to find categories to fit them into. And
Mhm.
those categories, I usually link them to features, right? So when I say category, is like from the pain points that you have identified, can they be grouped together in a feature? So I will use the word feature so to make things easier. So you guys probably have your own apps in your phone, and then those apps, they have many functionalities or features, if you like, and you really want to try to break that down so later on things, they are a lot more clear where they belong to, and that can also help you prioritize the work. So I like to do this, and the reason I said that is because when I was writing those pain points for our Runmate app, then I have this section. So, for example, I'm going to talk about right now pain points that I have identified, and I've placed those under a section called user profile. So, every app there is a user profile, and what usually are the pain points that I find when I'm signing to an app. There's sometimes too much information to fill it out when you're signing up. So don't know, like they ask you for a lot of your personal details, and sometimes you just want to be using the app for one time, and you still have to do that. So a lot of the times, what I really do is I I just close the app and I delete it and I try to find something else because I don't really want to be giving my personal information away. So um, too much information to me is a pain point. So I want to be giving as little information as possible. Obviously, I'm aware that that's going to change the way and my experience with the app if I don't provide enough information for the app to provide their features and their insights. But I don't really want to be doing that. So I would think that is a pain point for me. I also think I always this is something that I do on my phone. I disable every notification, even WhatsApp. If you like, if if you send me a message in a WhatsApp, it's not gonna come up on my home screen. The only thing that I leave on my home screen is my one of my Gmail accounts. I don't also leave every email account because I receive a lot of spam, and I also don't want to be receiving those notifications either. So um, pain point again, useless notifications. I want to be able to cut them down, not having them, or at least being able to say which ones I should have it. So that's a pain point for me. Just too much notification that does nothing really. Um, or they are triggering you to do something, but you don't really want to do it. So that's another one for me. Visual pollution in the app. So you really want your experience to be nice and be as clear as possible. So you don't really want like ads in the middle of your app, like pop ups or buy this T-shirt, things like that. I hate that. I completely hate that. It's a pain point for me. Um, so yeah, these are some of the ones that I have identified under the user profile category. If you don't have anything to add, then I think we can just move on to the other ones. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree with all of them. Like they are pain points for me as well, and I think they are like common pain points for everyone. Um, as you said, like we can come up with some strategies, I think, and that's what we're going to be trying to do. But probably later on, because we want to build an MVP. So first thing, we are not going to add that at all. For example, too much information. We are going to ask as less information as possible when signing up. And obviously, later on, if we need that, people can actually fill that up later when they are using the app and they feel they need to inform something to get something out of that. For example, most people don't like to inform their age, but for some sports apps, if you inform your age, the app is going to be able to tell you some parameters to actually do your sport, to actually tell you, oh, it's better if you do more strength training, or it's better if you do more cardio training. So, it's based on your age. So you have to inform your age. If you don't inform that, the app's not going to be able to give you that feedback. But you don't have to do that all at the beginning. Sometimes you get a form like with 10, 15 fields, which doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
So
that's
we
right.
want to, at the beginning, we want to ask as less as possible. So what you need to actually identify yourself, a username and a password probably, or just click like in a
Or maybe,
social media, like just
yeah, maybe
log
social
in,
media. Yeah,
log in with Google, log in with
yeah,
Apple, whatever.
yeah,
Just clicking there, you are identified. So we have at least your name or nickname and a contact way, for example, your email, and that's it. We don't need anything else to identify. So probably that's going to be the
yeah,
first thing we're going to be asking for. And
yeah,
yeah, definitely, I agree with all your pain points regards to the user profile. Yeah, let's try to move on to the next one. What's the next category, as you mentioned? I like the way to organize that. Like you put like
uh,
main features, and then you were talking about each of them. Yeah, let's see if I can
yeah.
agree with
That's
other
that's
people.
what I like to do. I mean, it's there's no right or wrong. That's what I like to do. Um, the next feature that we may mention before was the running clubs. And then the pain points that I found, and I think you already mentioned one of them, which is quite interesting. I love when these pop up in a natural way, but it's really have a centralized place where you can find your running clubs. So you say like I can go into Google, and then Google is gonna send me to another 10 pages, and then I have to click in each one of them to try and find it where they are. and are they close to me or not? Maybe you don't even know, right? Until you actually get into their page. So having a centralized way, having um, it's a pain point for me to actually um, find what are the running clubs that are around me. So some geolocation, kind of what I'm thinking about. So it's really what are the running clubs that are around me, so I can contact them, or I can, don't know, um, try to find a little bit more and perhaps join in. So joining is also, I just said join, but joining a group is sometimes a little bit, uh, it's a little bit hard. I'm talking about like registering and then contacting someone, and then you go into a page and there is a run club leader. No offense, but there is a mobile number there, and you call the number. They are not able to answer the phone, and you don't go to the group because you don't have enough information. So um, that's another pain point for me. Um, Also having a centralized view of events nearby you, because sometimes you are in a run club but they are not running on the same day that you are available to. So let's suppose you're working this Saturday and they usually are meeting up on Saturday. You will be delaying your running to be doing it on Sunday, so you want to find another event to go on Sunday with another running group perhaps. And having that centralized, I think, is also a pain point. Otherwise, I have to go and try to find somewhere that is having a Sunday event that I can attend to. Other things is, I know you probably are one of the people that I do that to. It's when I find something I want to share with my friends, then I have to go into the website and send to my friends. And it would be great if I could just click in a share, and send to 5 people all together that are on the app. So it's sometimes that experience of sharing the events with my friends, or even posting on social media, it's a little bit weak, because some of the running clubs, they may not even have social media, so they would not have something that you can use your Instagram to share to your feed or things like that. So again, having a centralized view, I think it helps a lot, and it's a pain point for me to not be centralized, to have to go individually to 10 pages to find the information that I'm looking at. And the other pain point that I used to find when I was in the beginning of my running journey was, how do I know if that group is the right group for me? Because I have just started. So I don't even run properly. I probably run, walk, or sometimes I can only walk. So how do I know if I'm gonna go into that group? And think about that. You are going into a running club, so you're joining some people for your social run, and you really want to be connecting with people, right? So you don't really want to go into a running club and run alone. Otherwise, you would just run alone. There's no point for you to go and attend to a running club social event. So you also don't want to be uncomfortable that you are holding people back. So you really want to find if the group that you have nearby you is the right group for you and is the right group for your level of fitness. Or if they have, for example, they have beginners, or if they have someone that's always looking after the beginners. So things like that. I think it's a pain point, because that prevented me from joining so many run clubs in the past, because I always had the feeling that I do not know whether that group is the right for me or not, because I'm just starting. That's probably more for people who are in the beginning of their running journey. rather than for people who have been already running for a while, because I think those they would feel more comfortable and even challenged to if they find a group where people are a little bit running a little bit faster than them, and that maybe perhaps they will find that challenging and they will find that motivating for them to pursue some improvement in their running. But I think that's for someone who is only starting, then that's one of the pain points for sure.
Yeah,
And I think I have actually have more stuff that I have recorded, but I think we should stop for now because um, we really will be explaining some of these things later on. So I think for now it's already a good example of some of the pain points we have identified. If you have anything to complement.
yeah. I just want to say, like, I agree with all the pain points you mentioned, and like, I think it's good we agree on that because it means it's probably a real pain point for all the runners, or for most of them at least. Obviously, we are not, let's say, an enough sample of all the runners because it's just two of us. But you know, on agreeing on that, I can guess like most of the runners they have similar problems, which we are trying to solve here. And like as my coach used to say, like running is a lifestyle, so it's not just like an activity you do or a sport. For me it's like a lifestyle. And then I agree when you say like most some of these problems they are more for the beginners, like you said, the running level or that stuff. But some of them they are for everyone. For example, finding a group or just sharing you were participating in something, or even like just find someone to run with you next Saturday. Some of those things like they are common to everyone. But yeah, I also agree we should stop here because otherwise we're gonna be uh, that's something, guys. Changing hats now, coming back to the IT specialist. That's something you should try to avoid as well. Because if you start to brainstorming, you're gonna start to want everything in the world. You can bring everything to your app. You can bring everything to your system, and we are trying to build an MVP here. So we don't want to be going too far on requirements. We don't want to be going too far and say, it would be good to have these and that's something else and that's something else. We're going to end up with like a list of 50, 60, 100 pages of requirements, which we
Mm,
don't want to build. We don't have the time and the resources to build that. We are a small team doing a volunteer job. So we want to start very small.
mm. Uh,
There are a few other things I think we should mention here. Felipe, like we still have a few other categories as you mentioned, like our main features. I think it's worth to mention just a few pain points on them. We don't want to list all of them, but just mention briefly another few pain points we have. For example, I think I can mention these ones, and you can see if you agree with me.
mm,
One of my pain points is actually we have too many apps to actually record activities individually. We have our own watch, like which is going to record our activity, and then we have like Strava, and then we have running something. We have many apps which is going to grab our activities, but it's a bit hard to put them all in one place and compare with your mates. you know
mm,
uh, Obviously comparison is better if you compare with yourself, not with someone else. But it's good, to create a bit of competition in there, especially if you have like a good if you have a good relationship with your mates, and you can create a healthy competition where you're not going to be doing something too crazy to each other. So just be careful in there. But yeah, one of my pain points was actually how we can compare that. Like, for example, I'm using Garmin watch, and one of my mates is using Apple Watch, and then we couldn't compare our activities because they're just in different place. So it was a bit hard for me.
I totally agree with every time that I download an app, I try to centralize as much as possible. And I think one great example that is related to these in the user profile is your ability to actually log in with your social media. and therefore you kind of like I have a Facebook, and then I can share the information that's on Facebook rather than having to type everything. And with activities, it's kind of like the same. You don't really want to be typing manually what you have done, and you don't want to be uh, like think about it. You may forget your watch, sure, and then you need to be able to do that so you can keep a track, sure. But most of the time you'll be wearing it, so it would be it, it's a little bit painful, I would say, if you have to be uploading your activities manually. And to be very frankly, I would not do it, as I don't do it. Like if I forget my watch, or if I'm not wearing my watch one day and I go for a run, that will never come up anywhere because I simply am not gonna do it. So it's the same concept, really. And being able to track from different devices is quite important, because we never know what device the people or the users will be choosing to wear.
Yeah, to be honest, I've seen some people who actually don't run if they forget their watch, because they run just because because of
I
the
have seen
tracking.
that
So
too. I have
I've,
seen that too.
I've seen some people, they go out and I forgot my watch, or like I run out of battery in my watch. I'm not gonna run today. I can't track it.
I have seen that before. I definitely have seen that before.
It's not a criticism, but I'm not that type of person. Like if I'm out to run, I'm gonna go and run. Like doesn't matter my watch, but unless like it's an interval training or something very specific where you need the watch to do the training. Otherwise, if it's just like for a normal session, like I
Yeah.
wouldn't
So,
bother.
so if you change your heads again, and let's try to wear their shoes, right? So why they would choose not to run if they're not wearing the watches? And it's probably because the watches are or the apps that are connected to that activity or that watch, they are collecting enough information to give them insights, and they feel like not having those insights will be detrimental to their training. So the pain point, if you break it down into what's the pain point like, and why they come back and they drive back home and pick up their watch and go and then go for a run, it's really they have the pain point of not being able or finding it hard to track their progress and finding out whether they are improving or not. So sometimes you have to reverse engineering when we see something to identify what kind of like pain point there is inside that context. So
Yeah,
that's another way of doing it.
yeah, yeah. Definitely, I never seen that way, but it's good insight. Good to know. Yeah. Let's get back instead of go too far, like in what the pain points are. Trying to bring that back on how people can do their planning other
Hmm.
than pain points. What else we should be look after? What else we should be trying to find out when we are doing the planning phase?
Um, one of the things that I think will naturally come is not something that you choose to do. Will naturally come in your brainstorm sessions because you're just brainstorming. There's you if you are brainstorming with yourself, it's a little bit easier to control. But if you are brainstorming with someone else, there's ideas that will be thrown on the table, and in the beginning you are trying to filter out, okay, what should go where. And sometimes you just want to do some placeholders, and later on you find out whether or not that will be part of your project. And those would be pretty much aspirations, or they would be uh, more interesting features that your app will have. They're not in the right moment to be built, so you would put them aside. And like there's many examples out there. Usually they will come out based on bias experienced. So if you have already downloaded an app which is on the same niche and you found out all those features, then you're going to start thinking, I want all those things that I have seen before in my app because I find that cool. So you should really take a moment to just take a note of it and say, okay, that's good, but I'm not doing that right now, so I'm just going to put aside. So it's part of the brainstorming. So how we actually organize the entire thing, I think you should use tools. For example, Google Docs, it's a way of doing it, but some people, they rather be uh, drawing instead of writing, so they can use mind map tools for brainstorming. I think there's one called Mind Master. I forgot exactly. I use one called Lucid Charts, but I'm not sure if it's paid or not because I use for my work. Um, so yeah, so a few tools that you would use it. It's a mind map, a word processor, so you write your ideas. Depending on where you are, then you would be perhaps using Google Forms to interview and collect data from possible users. If you struggle to identify the pain points for something that you are thinking of building, then I think is where you should go and find external help. So you should create a form, ask a few questions to some people that are on the right niche, and then see what the data tells you, and what in, how to get um, some visibility on what people would be expecting. Um, the other thing that I think is really important, it's split up or break down the known functional requirements versus the functional requirements, and what's really the difference here without digesting too much, because that's purely a BA concept. Um, Last time when you were with Lucas, you guys were discussing some of the, like, even the language could be one of the examples, but in other words, we could call them architectural requirements, which is what's the foundation for your app to be running. So it's not what the app can do; it's what the app really is. So, for example, performance requirements is based on an architecture. So if you want an app to be as fast as possible, then you really need to think about that from an architecture perspective. So you enable architecture, you enable infrastructure, so the app can have that desired outcome of performance. It's the same thing with internet of your home. If you want the internet to be as fast as possible, you probably should choose the best plan that your internet provider can give you. Otherwise, if you go with the cheaper plan, then the performance will not be the same, right? And that is not that will both they will both give you the ability to use the internet, but the outcomes, they are different from an architecture point of view. Yet that does not relate to the behaviors or the functional requirements that the application will have. So it's important to break those two down. So um, in the real world, if you're working in a company, they will go to an entirely different set of people. And for majority of people, I would say um, they tend to look into either one of those. So you having that understanding, it helps a little bit. So I think it's important when you are in this phase, you say, okay, this is an architecture, or it's a software thing, um, on the back. Um, how do they call that, on the more on the technical side of the things, rather than on the user experience and features that we have available. I mean, is that clear? I'm not sure if I
Yeah,
was able to articulate very well.
it is clear to me, but I'm gonna try to summarize to the audience, guys. We basically jumped from my runmates app, we were talking about the pain points, and then we jump on how to organize it. So how you guys can actually put that together for our app, or how we are putting that together for our app. Felipe has mentioned like many tools you can use, mind maps, you can use like even forms to interview people if you need. We are not doing that at the moment. For the My Runmates app, what we are doing, we are just using like a Google Docs. It's a poor Word document, and like we are sharing that between the teams. So we just put the requirements in there, and the way we are writing that down, we are actually separating that exactly as Felipe has mentioned. We are separating that in functional requirements and non-functional requirements. So we have to have that clear picture on what are functional requirements. That's the most of the requirements we are discussing today. We are talking about what the app is going to be doing, but we are not talking about how it's going to be under the hood. Like that's what we talked in the previous video when we talk about architecture, we talk about the phases to build the app, we talk about deployment, we talk about the programming language. That's all related to architecture. And we have that all written down in a Word document. That's a simple way to do that. We have more elaborated ways to do, yes, but as we want to be quick and we don't want to be learning new tools or explaining tools to some part of the team who doesn't understand that, the simple way to do that is just open a word processor document, either Google Drive or Microsoft Word, whatever you have, just write it down wherever you can. I think that's the simple way to do that, and that's how we are doing that. I think Felipe can bring to us some common artifacts they use for BAs, which we are sort of using like a small version of those artifacts,
Mhm.
or
Yeah.
let's say a simpler version of those artifacts. Can we call that simpler version, Felipe?
Yeah, for sure. All goes back to you don't really want to be planning too much and doing too little, right? So you're trying to be um, as not as fast as possible, but as directed. No, that's probably not the right word, but we are trying to be very concise in the way that we want to do this work, so we don't actually get stuck into the planning, and then we can start doing the development straight away. But just to mention some of the common artifacts that we produced as business analysts, I have mentioned about the problem statement, which really is a one-page document about what the problem really is, what are the benefits um, that solving that problem will bring to your audience, to your users. We have a document which is also called a business case, which is um, probably a little bit more detailed in terms of the entire holistic view of what that business look like, and where exactly in that picture you are coming in and trying to solve. Sometimes you don't have that document. It's not like they are commonly used documents, but not every project will have all of them.
Yeah,
it's really it's really an assessment that you do based on the project. But I think the most common one is the business requirement document, which is a word processor, as you said, and then you're gonna have those sections where you break down, this is what we need, this is what we expect the user to be able to do. And what's if you think about it, who are the most benefited person from a business requirement document? There are actually two. One is the person who is providing the requirement, so the business in this case, or the user or whatever that is. And the other one is the developer. So the developer can use that to understand, okay, these are the functions that I need to build. This is what they expect as an ability to be able to perform, or a task, or something that they'll be able to perform. And there are many ways of you capturing that. So you mentioned some of those tools. We have Jira, Trello, Notion, Asana. There's like many out there. But again, you said it very well. You don't really want to be learning those things right now. So maybe you leave that for later on, I guess.
Yeah, for the My Runmates, as I mentioned, we are doing like a little version of those things. We have sort of a problem statement, a small one, and we have the business requirement document. We definitely don't have a business case because it's not a business, it's a learning project. So we are building that for with the learning purpose in mind as the first, and the second thing to be something to solve our problems. As you mentioned, we are runners, we want to solve our problem. Basically, that's the two things we are trying to solve here. So if I have to say business case, it's basically to solve our own hobby problem, if we can
Yeah,
call like
that's right. That's right.
but that's a secondary stuff. So main purpose here is actually the learning process. And yeah, the tools, as you mentioned, like I think they are important when the team grows. So when you have more
Mm,
people working, it's better using a tool because the tool can actually make your life easier and make things go. You can move things faster using a tool other than just
yeah,
a written document, because the written documents it's hard to maintain that. And those documents, they are something, I call them alive documents,
they are.
because
Yeah,
it's something you're going to be changing over time. It's not something you
yeah,
write at the beginning and then you leave there and forget it. It's something you're going to be changing over time. You're going to be enhancing those documents over time, so we have a clear picture of what your app or your system should be at this point in time, and not like
yeah,
how it was when you planned that 6 months ago.
yeah.
So if you
Usually we freeze them.
really.
So for freeze, so we you said at some point in time that will be what we are looking at, and later on is something else. So we freeze that. Let's say today, let's suppose today is the 2nd of October, right? So until the 2nd of October, this is what it is, and after that, it, it might be something else. But
Right.
we have frozen based on that. That's the picture that everyone will be looking into for the development.
Yeah, and that when you freeze that, you say, okay, that's what you're going to be developing for the next sprints or for the next few weeks. But
Yeah, yeah.
then you can come back to that document later and enhance that, and then you're going to have a second version. So you probably are versioning
Oh,
that.
for
Is that
sure.
correct?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we haven't really spoken about, but after these brainstorm sessions, what you're gonna do is there's a bunch of things that's gonna come up in these documents, right? And the next thing you need to be able to do is prioritize. And you said like the words sprints and what exactly you'll be doing the next few weeks. It's really breaking it down. What are the priorities and what I should be doing when. So um, part of that is something called backlog, right? So things that we are not doing right now, they go into a backlog, which is a shopping list, essentially. And after you've finished what you have prioritized as the most important things for the moment, then you're gonna go and assess that backlog and see what else is out there for you to do it. And also, um, as you grow, things they get a little bit more interesting. So right now we don't have users using the app, so we don't have data to collect. So after, if there's users using the app, then you start having some insights on what they are doing, and perhaps you're gonna go back to your backlog and you're gonna say, okay, I had these as a priority 10, so it would not be delivered very soon, but it's something that I think the data is telling me I should reprioritize and actually include that into my next version of the app. So it really becomes a very interesting way of choosing what to do and what not to do based on evidence, which is what we don't have right now. So we don't want to get stuck.
Yeah, makes sense. We don't have anything, so we want to just get something out first, so we can
Mhm.
collect some data and we can understand how people are using that, and then we can come up what's the most important thing to do next. That's a
Yeah,
really interesting concept. But Felipe, we have been talking for almost 1.5 hours now, and I think
that's
we didn't bring you what like people really want. I think what they want from this video is like how they can do that in their projects, like a step by step, how they can build their functional requirements. Because you talk about non-functional and functional requirements, but this video is more about like functional requirements. Do you have like a step by step on how the audience can build that?
I do. I can share what I have done for our project, and I think there's no really right or wrong, right? Depends where you are, what you're doing, the product. There's too many variables that can change the way you follow your steps, right? But I'll try to I'll share what we have done, and then perhaps this can give you some guidance, right? So the step one is identifying what's the problem statement, what are the pain points for the user, what problems it's your application really solving. So I think that shouldn't that shouldn't really be something really too big. It's a one pager document. This is the problem. These are the pain points that I have identified, and this is what I'm trying to solve. So just write that into a document and move on. The next thing that you do after you have done those, you have wrote those pain points, you segregate them into categories or major features. So you try basically to group them into in a logical sense. So if you have said, as we have mentioned earlier, I don't want to give too much information. I don't want to receive too many notifications. That all about your user experience with the app and your profile on the app. So you being able to choose to have notifications or not having notifications, you being able to not having to put too many details in your sign up. So you just try to group those into major features. So identify the problem statement is the first step. The second one, then you break that down. And then the third one, which you could do the other way around if you like, but it's really brainstorm and identify what are additional functions that you think it should be going in your first version of the app, which uh, they're not necessarily solving the problem on its root. They are more facilitating the user interaction. So everything can be perceived as a problem. But again, going back to that Steve Jobs, maybe perhaps you are thinking of the solution and then creating the problem to apply to it. So you just want like to think about some of those things and put those into the documents. Don't worry about right now if you're gonna do it. If you're gonna do it straight away or not, just put there somewhere as a placeholder. Later on, you prioritize that. And again, if you do this, segregate those ideas into categories or major features. So group them to the ones that you have already identified, which are solving problems and are pain points that you are solving. And then use both things to prioritize, which is the next step. So you prioritize, define what are the features, what are the capabilities for your version one of the app, and everything else that's not on the version one of your app goes into the backlog. And the backlog is something that you're gonna reassess later on when you are ready for it. So leave it there. The next thing is think about and write it down perhaps so your team or you remember that later on in your learning journey. What's the frequency that you would like to revisit those items and do scope additions and add more features to your app? Think about that um, based on your own agenda, let's say, because right now you're starting to learning to code, so you're already studying the languages. You have other things in your personal life going on, so you shouldn't really be putting yourself into a spot where there's too much pressure or there's no pressure at all that you actually don't bother doing it. So you actually want to have some placeholders as dates, and then Joyce mentioned that as the time boxing. So you really want to time boxing and being able to identify where I should be coming up here and revise the things that I need to do later on. So you're kind of like always refining your planning session but they will become a little bit easier as you grow. Probably the first one is the hardest one, and later on they will be a little bit simpler. So, summarizing, step one, identify the problem statement. Step two, segregate the pain points into categories and major features. And then you brainstorm other aspirations, things that you like and you think should be in your app. Don't spend too much time on this. Just write down some things that you like based on your own experience. Again, segregate those or put those into the categories on step two. And then step five, you prioritize, define those features for the version one. And the step six is just you putting your own frequency to revisit these steps basically. And again, this is context based. So this is context based on the runmates app. That's what we are doing. If your company does something different, sure, it's a different context, it's a different environment. It's on a learning project. It's kind of like there's a lot of more things that I add into it. So just to summarize, it's context based.
Yeah, it's important to mention. But yeah, thanks, Felipe. I really agree with those steps. I think they are perfectly defined for our project. And I
Mm-hmm.
also think they are good for a personal project. So for the
Mm-hmm.
guys who are watching this video and they want to do their own personal project, I think those steps, they are a good approach to do. But I've said in the previous video, I'm going to reinforce here, we are not trying to be like one single solution for everything. We are not trying to be the perfect solution, especially for enterprise things. We are trying to bring here like a learning project, which is going to serve as an example for the ones starting their own personal projects. So it's something very small. It's something very incipient. So, it's not very mature. So this process, it does not fit for a mature development process. It definitely not. So don't try to apply that if you are working in a company and the company has 3, 5 years in the market and you already have a system running. Don't try to apply those things to your company or even to a startup. Don't try to apply that because you have a way
No.
more things to do in there. Felipe, if you can bring like, I'm trying to figure out here what would be the biggest takeaways we can take from all this video and all this session planning. I think, like if I have to summarize that, I would say first thing we have to have a balance between planning and doing. So what you're going to be planning, and don't plan too much. So start doing some planning, and then when we have enough, put your hands on and start to do that. But then the second takeaway would be try to capture everything you think of. So in the brainstorm sessions, try to capture everything, but don't be hold to be doing everything you think of. So
That's
capture
right.
everything, put in a backlog, and leave that there. Forget that in the backlog, and you're going to be prioritizing that later on once you have more data. So in the next steps, the next iterations, once you have your app outside, when someone is using that, you're going to be capturing some data, and then you're going to revisit your backlog and see if that's still important, if that's still
That's
something
right.
you want to do. And then it's going to bring to the last takeaway, like at least for me, the three ones I got was those ones. The last one is actually being revisiting that. So you're going to be revisiting your planning. And like coming back to the agile, I say we are always revisiting the backlog. So the backlog
Mm-hmm.
is our planning, basically. Everything we plan, we put in the backlog, and we are constantly revisiting that. So we are revisiting the backlog every single sprint or every 2 weeks or 3 weeks, depends on the way we are doing that. And that's a really good approach. I like, as I mentioned before, I like to bring that for all the things I do. So even if it's a personal project, and even it's just one person doing that, I still like to put some time frames and some boundaries of time in that. So you're gonna say, okay, I'm gonna be coding for the next 2 weeks. I'm gonna be coding this feature, and then after 2 weeks
Mm-hmm.
you stop. Whatever is done is done. You try to publish that. You try to get someone to use that. What's not done, you put that back to the backlog. Said, I had an idea to do this, but I couldn't do in this time. So put that back to the backlog. Have a look in the backlog again, see if there's any other priority you should bring to the next 2 weeks, and then you're going to figure out what to do. And if you can put something out to people to use, it's better. Sometimes you can't, sometimes you can, sometimes you can't, but yeah. Felipe, do you have any other takeaway just for us to summarize, to finish that? Do you want to say something else?
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway, definitely what you said, finding the right balance between planning and deep work. The other thing is, when you are defining your MVP, you need to be very precise and very simple, and have a very simplistic view. Some people will argue with me, but I think you should you should really have the minimum, bare minimum for you to start with, and then you go on and do something else. So what we are doing here is a lot more than that. But for example, we have mentioned three features, right? We have mentioned the user profile feature, we have mentioned the running clubs feature, and we have mentioned the activity recording feature. So I would have my version 0 with a user profile. So someone that signs up, and that goes into, in the backend, obviously that goes into a database as a user, and the only thing that they can see is the user profile. Does that mean we're gonna deploy that to the user? Absolutely no, because I'm not gonna put an app on the App Store where they can only sign up. But that's a good definition of an MVP for that feature. And then perhaps you do that first, and then you move to the next one. So when you do the next one, then you add the second feature, and you have already done the first. So that's another way of doing it. So why is that? So you don't get stuck on trying to find out your MVP is, and actually have your MVP too big that you can really take too long to deploy it.
Yeah, that brings in another thought, which is like you have to separate. When we talk about MVP, I think my concept is a bit like really minimum viable product. So a product means something someone can use. I would call this step, Felipe, as you mentioned, I would call the first iteration, where we're going to be delivering, like, for example, it is one feature, it is finished, it is completed. You have the user profile, and you can log in, you can see your profile, but I still wouldn't call that MVP. It's still not a product.
Yeah,
It is
we
something.
call it definition of done for your
Yeah,
iteration. Yeah,
yeah, it is the definition of done for the iteration. That's true.
yeah.
So you're going to be doing the first iteration, and that's the first thing you're going to be delivering. And I think it's important to say here, you're going to be delivering something. So don't get tied to, I've just done that, but it's still not 100%, or I still didn't deploy that, or I couldn't put in a test environment. Don't be tied to that. You have to deliver that. Doesn't mean you're going to have users like the real people using that, but you can have testers using that.
Mm-hmm.
And when I mean testers, it's going to be whoever is actually asking for an app, or in our case, it's going to be ourselves. I'm going to be
That's
testing
right.
that. Probably Felipe is going to be testing that. Probably Felipe's wife is going to be testing that, Gabi, who is also a runner.
That's
But
right.
it's going to be just between us. We are not going to publish that. We're not going to publish that to the public and say, you guys can test that. I have an app where you can sign up. People are going to laugh on us. Doesn't make
That's
sense.
right. That's right.
So we have to have the minimum viable product, which is something people can use, and that's going to be the first version of your thing. It's going to come after a few iterations. So you're going to be doing 1, 2, 3 iterations, and that's why it's important to prioritize the most valuable features for the user. So we're going to be delivering the ones they are going to value the most. That's the ones we're going to be delivering first. Obviously, there are some fundamental requirements. For example, sign up. Do people value sign up? No, they won't. They don't give a shit for that. Sorry for the word, but they don't care about that. No one cares about the sign up. But the trick is they need that. We can't have an app without signing up. So that's a fundamental feature. It's something structural. Yes, we have to do that, but you have to keep a balance between those fundamental things. Don't be tied to be building the fundamentals and all the time building the fundamentals and not getting to something available. You have to put your hands on something available too. Felipe, any other
That's
takeaway?
right. Yeah, I agree. I might not have articulated that well, but thanks for
Sorry for
rephrasing
that.
what I said.
Sorry for that. Any other takeaway, mate?
No, I think it's been a great session. I really hope these help in your students' learning journey. And it was a pleasure to be here. And I hope we meet up again, maybe in another section later on when we have a little bit more details to show about the run apps and who knows. But yeah, it was a great pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks for being available and actually helping these guys. I think they're gonna appreciate that. I definitely appreciate you being available for us and helping us with the whole project. Doing this video and also bringing your experience to the project as well. And for sure, we're probably gonna be doing other sessions, either about the My Run Mates app. And also, we probably going to be doing another video, if you agree, like about the BA role. I think some
Sure,
people are curious about that, like they want to know more
sure,
about the BA role. We can be doing another video.
sure.
So yeah,
Do it.
thanks for that.
Let's do it.
Any final words? Cool.
That's all good from me.
All right.
Thanks
Okay.
everyone for watching. If
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to leave your thumbs up, to share the video with someone you think it's going to be helpful to. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time.
Bye.